All right, happy Mother's Day, everybody, and happy throwback weekend. Been looking forward to this Darlington race. Really excited to see how the next gen car is going to race here. Pretty good race here. Last year, the intermediate tracks have been pretty good with this car, and also apologize for not being able to get any content out video wise. At least last week for Kansas, it was my youngest brother's graduation, so it was out celebrating, doing some traveling and hanging out with family. But back for Mother's Day, not really sure if I'm gonna be able to see the race, but I'll definitely have plenty of time tonight and early tomorrow morning to get some DFS lineups in. But yeah, let's dive into it here. So looking at the driver breakdown, the way that I'm approaching this slate, you got Larson, Hamlin, Truex, and Byron. DraftKings knows, what they're doing. They priced all these drivers up as the most expensive, and I think for good reason. I think you can make a great argument to have any of these drivers in your line, but for me, these are really the four drivers I want to build around. Now, obviously, you won't be able to get all four of them in your lineup, or at least I highly doubt it. I've not tried to do that, but probably not going to work out for you if you do. But for me, I want to try to get at least one, hopefully two, maybe even potentially three of these drivers in my lines at any given time. And then from there, it's really just trying to mix and match, these top four plays with other plays on the slate that we like. So it really just kind of comes down to, who are some of the other plays you want to try to get to, what of these four plays, which ones are your favorite, and I'll kind of tell you, the way that we're leaning. So get Kyle Larson, the most expensive. His practice times weren't great, but that's really not too much of a concern for me. I mean, he was able to come out in qualifying and put down a pretty good qualifying time. We saw how fast his car was at Kansas, at all the other intermediate tracks. I mean, it's Kyle Larson at Darlington. There's a lot to like here. It's one of his better tracks. He did win the Xfinity race, so I like Larson, but I can also make an argument if you think, hey, it really constricts my line if I'm playing Larson, but he's still pretty easy to get to with his price tag. It's not like he's $13,000 like he was in the Xfinity race. Hamlin starts right next to Larson, pretty much an identical play in my mind. He just win after kind of a little bit of a controversial finish there with Larson at the end of Kansas, but neck and neck. This is one of Hamlin's best tracks. He's a top 10 machine here. He's good at managing his tires. If we get some long runs, I really like the JGR cars over the long run. So got to have a lot of Hamlin, got to have a lot of Larson. I have them projected both to, lead laps, both to pick up fast laps, and I have them both, projected to contend for the win. Now, Truex was interesting. Truex, his practice times weren't great, but obviously he was able to go out there and get the pole. And with Darlington and also with Truex and just how this car races, he's going to have that clean air. So he's going to be very popular in cash games. He's probably going to get a little bit of an ownership spike compared to Larson, Hamlin, and Byron. So for those reasons, I'm going to be a little bit under the field with my Truex ownership, but I still have them as a high interest because I'm still going to have them in a good chunk of my lines. I'm just going to try to get a little bit under Truex compared to potentially where the field is going to be on him. But I really like him a lot. I mean, it's hard not to just plug Truex in your line and then try to build around him because it's hard not to see him leading some laps. So, like I said, Larson, Hamlin, Truex, even Byron, I think you could kind of throw a blanket over all four of these drivers, and I can easily see any of them getting out front and leading laps. And again, that's why they're the most expensive and why they're going to carry high interest for us. So really like William Byron too, even despite his issues at Kansas. I mean, that car was flying. I mean, he had a terrible stage one, spun, hit the wall, speeding penalty, and he still came back, was contending to almost, win that race. So it just goes to show you how fast these Hendrick cars are, how fast these JGR cars are. So, anytime you can get Hendrick or JGR in your lineup, I think that is the way to go. So I'm personally rooting for Byron just because I'm a big Gordon fan. I like to see the Gordon throwback car, paint scheme there. So of course I had to go ahead and reorder that die cast. So the fan in me, wants to just plug Byron into my lineup. But if you actually look at the DFS data, Willie was fastest in the 10 lap, uh, practice averages as far as lap times go. And, him and Elliott look like they have the best cars, at least according to practice. So really like the upside there for Byron. Probably a little bit more of a GPP option potentially. I think a lot of people in cash games are just going to go Truex, but again, I want a ton of Larson, a ton of Hamlin, a ton of Truex, and a ton of Byron. From there, I think your lineup can really get, interesting. It just kind of comes down to what combination. If you get, one of those four, two of those four, three of those four in your line, that's personally the way that I'm building. So because of those reasons, I'm not getting a ton of Kyle Busch in my lines. I'm not getting a ton of Tyler Reddick, but I still think they're interesting plays. I think if you are only building with one of Larson, Hamlin, Truex, or Byron, it allows you to get a little bit different with your line. So maybe you play a Truex with a Busch, a Truex with a Reddick. Like I would probably really only do that if you're building like 20 max lines or even like obviously 150 max. But if you're just doing 1 to 3 lines, maybe even 5 lines, I don't really see myself getting to some of these plays up here, just because I have Byron, Truex, Hamlin, Larson just projected, so high. But Bush has been getting unlucky. I think he's probably going to be very overlooked in the 10K range and should carry a lot less ownership than everyone else. So they might potentially get a little bit of a leverage play there, especially if one of those top 4 drivers has an issue. Same with Reddick. I mean, Reddick, it is Darlington. The skill set of being able to ride the wall and getting a little bit closer to the wall, pick up you a lot of speed. And, Larson and Reddick are two of the best of doing that. But it's just, I have a hard time paying up for Busch and Reddick when I can just pay slightly more to get a driver I've projected more, or paying down in the other 2 plays I really like to build around Larson, Hamlin, Truex, and Byron. Again, some combination of that is pairing one of those or 2 of those plays with potentially Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott looks like a great place differential upside play who also has an extremely fast car. And if he can somehow race his way to the front of the field, I can see him picking up fast laps. I can see him leading laps. And I just really like that upside there. So Chase Elliott is going to be another driver I'm really interested in. And also Chastain. I think Chastain is a little bit of a cheaper version, probably not projected as high as a Larson, Hamlin, Truex, or Byron, but Trackhouse and Chastain aren't too far behind, and I really like the price discount you get for Chastain. So maybe you play, Truex, Elliott, and Chastain, and you build around those 3 types of plays. So it's still making sure you have at least one of Larson, Hamlin, Truex, or Byron, but then trying to find some other, top tier, high projected type plays you compare with those drivers, or playing, Byron and Truex together and then playing Elliott together, for example. Like a lot of my lines have combinations like that. Because of those combinations, again, I'm not really getting to Bell. I'm not really getting to Logano. I'm not really getting to Harvick. I have a little bit of Wallace, not really getting to Blaney, Keselowski, Josh Berry. Like those are just the ways that I'm building. If I look at some of these plays, for me, I would probably lean on Harvick and Wallace as my 2 favorite options. Harvick has really good track history here. But if you look at SHR, it's just tough to feel confident plugging those drivers in your line. I mean, Harvick qualified mid-pack. His practice times were mid-pack, but he's probably going to be a top 10 car just because we know it's Harvick, especially if you get those long green flag runs. He'll be able to manage his tires, work his way through the field. And if you're looking for a dart play, someone to get a little bit different, Bubba Wallace, I was actually really surprised with his practice times and ultimately his qualifying times as well. So maybe he's a contrarian lap leader. Hey, everyone's going to assume that Truex is going to go out there and lead all those laps, but who's going to start right on the front row right next to him? It's going to be Bubba Wallace. So I would say 70%, maybe even higher. Most likely it's going to be Truex who's going to get out front and get the early lead. But for whatever reason, if Truex doesn't get the lead and Bubba Wallace is able to get out there and lead you some laps, for $8,600 to get a lap leader in your line, like it's a very contrarian option to build. So, maybe you build 4 lines with, Truex and maybe 1 line with Wallace or, something like that, just something to get a little bit different. And then getting down to the 7K range, let's see here. Suarez, I have him as medium. I might, I don't really. I was going back and forth between medium low with him. I have him as medium just because of the equipment that he's in and his qualifying time. His qualifying time was very attractive for me from that standpoint, from a DFS standpoint, because his practice times weren't great. I don't think a lot of people are going to get to him, so he's probably going to be a little bit of a lower owned option that I think can honestly just stay inside the top 10 all day long. Maybe pick up some fast laps. Trackhouse has been pretty good on pit road. Never know. Maybe he gets out front, leads you some laps. At least he has that upside. Ty Gibbs is kind of in that same category. I probably like Gibbs a little bit more. Doesn't maybe have the most experience at this track, but his practice times, especially over the long runs, look pretty good. And getting a JGR car for $7,700, Gibbs has been running well as of late too. So I like that. But if you're looking for some safer options, some options that give you some place differential upside, some options that are probably a little bit more cash game safe, and also just also good tournament plays, it's hard not to like Chris Buescher and Eric Jones. Basically start right next to each other. This is Eric Jones, arguably his best track. Now, it is a little bit of a concern. He has been feeling under the weather, had to take some fluids, but I'm hoping, unless we see reports tomorrow morning, and if so, we'll try to get those updates out to you. But all signs are pointing to he's still going to be able to race, and he should be fine come Sunday. So I really like the upside that Eric Jones has for his price. For whatever reason, if you can't get up to Chris Buescher, like I said, Eric Jones and Chris Buescher, I have them projected to both finish very well. And they're very easy to pair with those top plays that we were talking about. Stenhouse, pretty cool qualifying time, just not ready to get there. Don't feel great about Chase Briscoe. Austin Dillon's probably a little bit more of a GPP play. And then from there, if you can't get the Buescher, you can't get to Jones. If you're going a little bit more top heavy and having to go a little bit more, bottom heavy to round out your lineups. I really like Preece, mainly just because of his starting, position. Same with Allmendinger. Preece and Allmendinger, I have them projected to relatively finish around the same spot. Probably would give the nudge to Ryan Preece just because he ran more laps in qualifying. I think he has a little bit of a better understanding of kind of what his team and his car needs. And he also gives you just slightly more place differential upside. Don't really see myself getting too much to Haley or Almirola. I think McDowell's an interesting, potentially lower owned punt option you can consider. Crazy to see a Penske car at $5,900. I mean, Austin Cindric and his finishes have been atrocious, so I understand it. But still, it's a Penske car for $5,900. That's a lot of good value play, especially when you look at his practice time. So I like Cindric a lot as a punt play, just to give you some value. A guy who can finish inside the top 20, and that's really all you're really looking for from these punt plays. And the equipment alone is good enough for a top 20 finish. The Rocket Man, Ryan Newman, pretty impressive. He was able to qualify 26 in a workwear racing car for not having any experience in a next gen car. So from a fan perspective, love to see it. From a DFS perspective, absolutely hate to see it. No way you can play Rick Ware racing, starting 26th. Good root for him. Hopefully does well, but not really a DFS play. Gregson, slower practice times, qualifying time kind of backed that up. Not too excited there. Todd Gilliland showed some good practice times. Little bit limited on upside based off his qualifying, because but he's more of a pivot option off of Corey LaJoie. I think everyone's going to plug in Corey LaJoie as their go-to punt play. So again, where are you going to get different on the slate? Is it getting away from some of those top tier plays where you're talking about maybe trying to find a little bit of a different combinations, or maybe only playing two of them and then playing it with more of like an 8K or 7 or 9 or 8K driver instead? Oh, maybe only playing one of them and trying to get a little bit more of a balanced lineup, or are you gonna eat the chalk when it comes to the top plays and maybe look at pivot options and kind of your mid range and the punt range? It's just little things you have to consider. I'll I usually like to build combinations of different scenarios, pivot here, pivot there. I'll try to usually build, you know, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it can be on the low end, 5 to 7 lines. On the high end, even sometimes it can be, 20 maxing. It's just every weekend's a little bit different. Um, but not really going to get to Burton, Dillon, Poole or McLeod. So, long story short, Larson, Hamlin, Truex, Byron, some combination of them, and then getting to plays like Elliott, getting to plays like Chastain, really like hammering, Busher and Jones kind of in the mid range, and then trying to get, Cindric and LaJoy for the most part to kind of round out your lineup. And depending on what top tier plays you have, it's going to, kind of force you in a certain direction. So when you are finding yourself forced to the same range over and over and over again, a lot of other people are potentially building that way too. So it's just trying to figure out like, what is that one driver that maybe no one is really talking about that I can try to get in my line just to get a little bit different, hopefully get some leverage on the field. So yeah, that'll do it. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. If it is, dropping a like on the video, commenting, subscribing if you haven't, really means a lot. We're slowly but surely, I think, what are we at now? Yeah, 682. So getting closer to 700. We're almost at 1,100 followers on Twitter. We'll post this spreadsheet there. It's at Fast Cars FM. But yeah, hopefully everyone has a good Mother's Day weekend and enjoys the race, and catch you guys next week.